I never imagined I'd have to fight an HOA, never thought anyone would try to take land my family's owned since the 80s. But then a woman named Karen Miller moved into our neighborhood and decided to bulldoze my peaceful retirement. And I mean that literally. I'm Jack Davies, 52, retired Army Corps of Engineers, and this is how my quiet life turned into a property battle that went all the way to the top. It started innocently enough. My wife Sarah and I, after 2 decades of moving around with the military, finally found our dream home in Oakwood Bluffs. It had everything: mature trees, a modern house, and a 5-acre parcel of undeveloped woodland that we had no intention of selling. This was our sanctuary. My kids Leo and Maya built forts back there. It was where Sarah and I walked every evening, a peaceful retreat from the world. But all of that came to an end the day Karen Miller showed up on my lawn. She came with a clipboard like she was some kind of official, and her first words were a power trip wrapped in the nicest bureaucratic smile. "This isn't a request, Mr. Davies. This is a notification of compulsory eminent domain for community improvement." I'm sure you can imagine the chill that ran down my spine. She told me that the very woods behind my house, the ones I'd fought for, the ones I'd poured my blood and sweat into, were going to be a tennis court. A tennis court. My woods, my 5 acres, were now going to be torn up to serve her so-called community vision. The audacity. And just like that, my life went from quiet to chaos. Of course, I didn't take her paper. I didn't even look at it. I just stared at her, trying to hide my anger behind a mask I'd perfected over the years. "You can't just take my land," I said. "It's not part of the HOA's jurisdiction." She gave me this dismissive sniff as if my concerns were trivial. A procedural technicality, she said, as though dismissing me was her prerogative. She told me that the original developer had planned for all the land to be part of the HOA. That was their excuse. But what she didn't know was that I had done my homework when I bought the property. I knew what was mine. This wasn't just about land. This was about principle. She thought she could steamroll me because I was a quiet man, an easy target. But she was wrong. She had just declared war on the wrong guy. The battle for my 5 acres had begun, and I wasn't going to lose. But I didn't just start shouting. No, I'm a strategist. I sat down, put my pen to paper, and wrote the HOA a letter. I wasn't rude, but I was clear. I laid out the law, citing the deeds, the covenants, and the surveys. This was my land, not theirs. I wasn't going to play her game. I sent it via certified mail, return receipt requested. I wanted to make sure there was no doubt about my stance. I knew this fight wasn't going to be won with words, it was going to be won with facts. A week later, I got their reply. And let me tell you, Karen had a way with words. The letter written by her was patronizing. She basically told me to stop being difficult and cooperate. She even claimed that this was all for the betterment of the community. I knew then that this wasn't going to end quickly. She wasn't just misinformed. She was doing this on purpose. But she wasn't going to break me. Karen started escalating, sending me fines for petty things. My grass was a 1/4 inch too high. My garbage cans were left out a few minutes too long. Each fine was a small thing, but it was clearly retaliation. I kept meticulous records, documented everything. I wasn't going to be worn down. Then came the quarterly HOA meeting, and I knew it was time. I was ready. Karen stood in front of the room gloating about the community enhancement she was pushing. She didn't mention my name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. I had to bite my tongue to keep from standing up and yelling. But this wasn't the time for that. I was playing the long game. At home, things were escalating. I began researching. I wanted to find a chink in her armor. I demanded all the HOA's documents under the Property Owner Association Act, of course. But they were stonewalling me. The documents they sent were redacted, incomplete, and vague. But I wasn't about to back down. I had patience. I started digging into the real records, and that's when I found the bombshell. The streets in Oakwood Bluffs weren't even legally part of the HOA. They had been drawing maps and making rules based on land they didn't even own. That's right, the roads in the entire subdivision weren't legally dedicated to the HOA. The implications were enormous. Karen had no authority over the streets, no right to enforce any of her parking rules or fines. I immediately took this information to my lawyer, Dave Sterling, a former military lawyer who was no stranger to a good fight. We strategized and we set the trap. I had the proof, and all we needed was for Karen to confirm it herself. So we sent the HOA a letter, not from me, but from Dave's law office, simply asking for clarification on the ownership of the roads. We knew Karen wouldn't resist. Her ego wouldn't let her. The response was everything we hoped for. Karen sent back a letter that was a masterpiece of arrogance. She claimed the HOA had exclusive jurisdiction over the roads for the past 40 years, but she had made a fatal mistake. She put everything in writing. Every ticket, every fine, every rule she'd enforced was now fraudulent. The next stage was simple. We waited for the surveyors. They showed up ready to survey my land for the new tennis courts. I walked out with my property deed in hand and told them flat out they were trespassing. They were confused, but they called Karen. When they came back, they packed up and left. The whole thing was on video, and I uploaded it online. The neighborhood saw for themselves the truth of what was happening. From there, the tide started to turn. People saw Karen for what she was, a bully with no authority. Mrs. Gable, the sweet old widow, came to me with her story of Karen's harassment. The Millers, the young family across the street, told me about their battle over a basketball hoop. As they shared their stories, our little alliance grew. We weren't just residents anymore. We were a community fighting back. The day of the HOA annual meeting arrived and we were ready. I asked Karen point blank for the deed to the roads. She stammered, unable to provide proof. Then we pulled out the county plat map showing the absence of any legal transfer of ownership. Karen's entire power structure collapsed in front of everyone. The board immediately held a vote of no confidence and Karen was removed. Her reign of terror ended in an instant. The tennis courts were dead before they were ever built and my 5 acres were safe. The community had reclaimed its power. The real victory, though, came months later when Sarah and I walked through the woods, our woods again. The leaves had turned gold and crimson, and as we walked in comfortable silence, I realized something. I hadn't just won a legal battle. I'd defended my home, my family, and my community. Karen Miller thought she could take everything from us. But she didn't understand that you can't take what belongs to a person with heart and resolve. When everything was laid bare, she was the one who lost. The power she thought she had was nothing but an illusion. It's been quiet since. The HOA now works with transparency, and the real roads, are finally officially part of the community. But the best part, I get to walk through these woods in peace, knowing that we fought for what was right. And every time I step on that ground, I know it's ours.